I pressed my ear against my mother's kitchen window as my son gripped my hand in fear, listening to the two people I trusted most laugh about stealing the money meant for his future. That moment was the end of my old life, and the beginning of my revenge. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I stood frozen behind my mother's kitchen window, my 11-year-old son Tyler gripping my hand so tight it hurt. But nothing could compare to the pain slicing through my chest as I listened to the two people I trusted most in this world destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. She's so broken, Helen. Always crying. Always needy. I can't take it anymore. My husband Brandon's voice carried through the thin glass like a knife to my heart. My mother's laugh was sharp and cruel. I told you not to marry her, didn't I? Always said she was too weak for a man like you. Too damaged. The words hit me like physical blows. My legs went weak. Tyler looked up at me with confused eyes, sensing something terrible was happening, but not understanding what. I pressed my finger to my lips, telling him to stay quiet even as my whole world crumbled around us. The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while. Brandon continued, his voice casual like he was talking about the weather. But now that's almost gone. I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic. I had to grip the windowsill to keep from falling. Insurance money. The money I thought we'd been saving for Tyler's college. The money that was supposed to secure our future. He'd been using me this whole time. What are you going to do about it? My mother asked. I could hear the excitement in her voice like she was enjoying this conversation. I'm going to leave her. Take everything. She's so weak and broken. She won't even fight me. She'll just cry and accept it like she always does. That's when something inside me died. The part of me that still believed in goodness, in love, in family. But from those ashes, something else was born. Something cold and calculating. Something that would make sure Brandon and my mother learned exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. I pulled Tyler away from the window and walked quietly to my car, my mind already spinning with plans. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. 3 months earlier, I had been living what I thought was a perfect life. Well, as perfect as life could be for someone like me. My name is Rebecca, and I've spent most of my 32 years believing I wasn't good enough for the good things that happened to me. The morning that would change everything started like any other Tuesday. I woke up in our cozy 3-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same house Brandon and I had bought when Tyler was just 2 years old. The same house where I thought we'd grow old together. Brandon was already up, showered, and dressed in his blue work uniform. He managed a small construction company, and he was good at it. Everyone in town respected him. He was the kind of man other men wanted to be friends with, and women found attractive. I never quite understood what he saw in me. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my forehead as I stumbled into the kitchen in my old bathrobe. "Coffee's ready." I smiled at him, my heart doing that little flutter it had done since our first date 12 years ago. Even after all this time, even through all the hard times we'd faced, I still felt lucky to be married to Brandon Miller. "Tyler up yet?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee and adding the cream Brandon had left out for me. He always remembered little things like that. Or so I thought. Still sleeping. "I'll get him up in a few minutes." Brandon checked his watch. "I've got that big job starting today. The Jackson House renovation might be late tonight." I nodded, used to his long hours. The construction business was unpredictable, especially in a small town like Riverside. We'd learned to make the most of the time we had together. "Mom called yesterday," I said, stirring my coffee. "She wants us to come visit this weekend. It's been a while." Brandon's face changed for just a second. Something flickered in his eyes, but it was gone. So fast I thought I imagined it. "Sure, sweetheart. Whatever you want." Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to that moment. Should have noticed how his voice sounded different when he agreed. Should have seen the way his jaw tightened. But I was so busy being grateful that my husband and mother got along well that I missed all the warning signs. Tyler bounded into the kitchen then, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. At 11, he was all arms and legs, growing so fast I could barely keep him in clothes that fit. "Morning, Mom. Morning, Dad." He grabbed a piece of toast from the counter and took a huge bite. "Slow down, buddy." I laughed. "Breakfast isn't going anywhere." Brandon ruffled Tyler's hair. "Listen to your mom, son. She knows what she's talking about." The way he said it, so warm and loving, made my chest tight with emotion. This was my family. These two people were my whole world. Without them, I was nothing. Or at least that's what I believed. Then Brandon left for work with his usual kiss and love you at the door. Tyler caught the school bus right on time. And I settled into my usual routine of cleaning the house, doing laundry, and getting ready for my part-time job at the local library. I loved working at the library. It was quiet and peaceful, and I got to help people find books that might change their lives the way books had changed mine. Reading had been my escape growing up in a house where my mother criticized everything I did. Books showed me that there were other ways to live, other ways to be. My supervisor, Mrs. Maverick, was shelving returns when I arrived. "Good morning. Rebecca, you're looking well today." Mrs. Maverick was one of the few people who made me feel valued. She was in her 60s with kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking that reminded me of the grandmother I'd never had. "Thank you, Mrs. Maverick. How was your weekend?" "Lovely, dear. My grandson came to visit. He's about Tyler's age, you know. They should meet sometime." I smiled and nodded, but inside I felt that familiar twist of anxiety. Making plans with other families meant risking them seeing how broken I was. What if Tyler was embarrassed by me? What if the other parents thought I wasn't good enough? The morning passed quietly. I helped a young mother find picture books for her toddler, assisted an elderly man with research for his family tree, and organized the new fiction arrivals. Simple tasks, but they made me feel useful. I was reorganizing the children's section when I overheard Mrs. Maverick talking to another librarian, Janet, by the front desk. "Saw Brandon Miller at the diner yesterday around noon. Janet was saying he was with Helen Lakin. Looked pretty cozy if you ask me. My hands froze on the book I was holding. Helen Lincoln was my mother's name. Really? Mrs. Maverick sounded surprised. I didn't know they knew each other that well. Oh, they seem to know each other very well, Janet said with that tone people use when they're implying something without saying it outright. My heart started beating faster. There was probably an innocent explanation. Maybe Brandon had run into my mother somewhere and they decided to have lunch. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. But something cold settled in my stomach anyway. I tried to focus on my work for the rest of the day, but Janet's words kept echoing in my mind. Looked pretty cozy if you ask me. When I picked Tyler up from school, I almost asked him if he wanted to drive by the construction site to see his dad, but something stopped me. A feeling I couldn't quite name. That evening, Brandon came home at almost 10 to. He looked tired, his clothes dusty from work. Sorry, babe, long day. He kissed my cheek quickly and headed for the shower. How was the Jackson job? I asked. Good, really good. Should keep us busy for weeks. But when I looked out the window, I noticed his truck was completely clean. No dust, no dirt, nothing that looked like he'd been doing construction work all day. That night, as Brandon slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to push away the thoughts creeping into my mind. Brandon loved me. He'd chosen me. We had a good life together. But doubt once it takes root is hard to kill. The next few weeks passed in a strange haze. On the surface, everything looked normal. Brandon went to work. Tyler went to school. I went to the library. We had dinner together most nights. We watched TV as a family on weekends. But underneath, something had shifted. I found myself paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way Brandon sometimes seemed distracted during conversations. How he'd started taking his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. The fact that he'd changed his passcode and angled the screen away from me when he used it. Small things that could have innocent explanations, but they added up. I also started noticing things about my mother. How she always seemed to know details about Brandon's work that I hadn't shared with her. How she'd ask about him first, whenever I called before asking about Tyler or me. How's Brandon handling that big construction project? She'd ask. But I hadn't told her about any big construction project. When I mentioned it to Brandon, he just shrugged. Probably heard it around town. You know how people talk in Riverside. That was true. Riverside was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, but it still felt strange. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday in early November. Tyler had a half day at school because of teacher conferences, and I'd taken the afternoon off from the library to spend time with him. Can we visit Grandma Helen? Tyler asked as we sat at the kitchen table sharing a grilled cheese sandwich. My mother had always insisted that Tyler call her Grandma Helen instead of just Grandma. She said it sounded more sophisticated. I thought it sounded cold, but I'd never argued about it. I don't know, sweetie. We should call first to make sure she's home. But when I tried calling my mother's house, the phone went straight to voicemail. Her cell phone did the same thing. Maybe she's out shopping, Tyler suggested. We could drive by and see if her car is there. My mother lived about 20 minutes away in the house I'd grown up in. A small, tidy place with a garden she was proud of and neighbors she'd known for 30 years. All right, I agreed. But if she's not home, we'll just come back another day. The drive to my mother's house was peaceful. Tyler chatted about school and his friends, and I half listened while enjoying the fall scenery. The leaves were at their peak, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson. But when we turned onto my mother's street, my blood turned cold. Brandon's truck was parked in my mother's driveway. I pulled over across the street, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Tyler looked up from his handheld game, confused. Why? Did we stop? Isn't that Dad's truck? Yeah, I managed to say it is. My mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe Brandon was helping my mother with something around the house. Maybe her sink was leaking or her roof needed repair. Maybe. Are we going in? Tyler asked. In a minute, I said. I just want to figure out what's going on first. Something deep in my gut was screaming danger. Every instinct I had was telling me not to go up to that door, not to knock, not to announce our presence. We walked quietly around to the back of the house. My mother's kitchen window faced the backyard, and I knew from years of childhood experience that you could hear conversations inside pretty clearly from that spot. What I heard destroyed my world. She's so broken. Helen, always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore. Brandon's voice was tired, frustrated, like he was talking about a burden he'd been carrying too long. I told you not to marry her, didn't I? My mother's voice was sharp with satisfaction. Always said she was too weak for a man like you. Too damaged. I gripped the windowsill so hard my knuckles went white. My 11-year-old son Tyler gripped my hand so tight like he understood well what was happening. The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while. Brandon continued. But now that's almost gone. I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic. The world tilted. My father had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving me a substantial life insurance payout. Money that Brandon and I had supposedly been saving for Tyler's future. Money that was supposed to be our safety net. What are you going to do about it? My mother asked, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. I'm going to leave her. Take everything. She's so weak and broken. She won't even fight me. She'll just cry and accept it like she always does. They both laughed then. Actually laughed about my pain, my weakness, my trusting nature. When my mother asked soon, maybe after the holidays, I don't want to ruin Tyler's Christmas. The kid doesn't deserve that. You're too soft, my mother said. She's been a disappointment since the day she was born, weak just like her father. At least he had the decency to die and leave her some money. That was when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. My father had been a kind, gentle man who loved books and taught me that I was worthy of love. My mother had spent my entire childhood comparing me unfavorably to other children, telling me I wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, strong enough for anything good. I believed her. I'd spent my whole adult life grateful that Brandon had chosen damaged, weak, pathetic me. But now I knew the truth. He hadn't chosen me. He'd chosen my father's money. And my mother hadn't just been critical. She'd been actively working to destroy my self-worth so that when this moment came, I'd be too broken to fight back. I walked back to the car on unsteady legs. Tyler looked up at me with concern. Mom, are you okay? You look really pale. I'm fine, sweetie, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Change of plans. We're going home. But what about Dad's truck? Shouldn't we say hi? Dad's busy helping Grandma Helen with something. We'll see him at home. As I drove away from my mother's house, Tyler chattering in the backseat. My mind was already working, planning, calculating. They thought I was weak. They thought I would just cry and accept whatever they did to me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I really looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was 32 years old, but looked older, tired. Her brown hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail she'd worn for the last decade. No makeup because Brandon always said he liked me natural clothes that were practical and modest, because anything else felt like asking for attention I didn't deserve. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had spent her entire adult life trying to be small, quiet, and grateful for whatever crumbs of love people threw her way. But behind my plain brown eyes, something new was burning. Something that had been sleeping for too long. Brandon came home around 11 same as always. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, told me about his busy schedule tomorrow. The perfect husband act. That night, after Brandon fell asleep, I got up and went to our home office. We kept all our financial records in a filing cabinet there. Records that Brandon handled completely because I was too emotional to deal with money matters. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The insurance money from my father's death, $1,500 that was supposed to be Tyler's college fund, was almost gone. $50,000 had been moved to an account I didn't recognize. Another $30,000 had been withdrawn in cash over the past 6 months. The rest had been spent on things that made no sense. $20,000 for home improvements that had never happened. $15,000 for business equipment for Brandon's construction company. Thousands more for expenses I couldn't identify. I sat in that office until dawn, going through every piece of paper, every statement, every receipt, building a picture of exactly how thoroughly I'd been betrayed. By the time the sun came up, I knew 3 things for certain. First, Brandon had been stealing from me systematically for months, probably planning his exit strategy. Second, my mother had been part of it from the beginning. Phone records showed dozens of calls between them, often during times when Brandon had told me he was working. And third, they had severely underestimated me. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I called in sick to work, not because I was actually sick, but because I had things to do, important things. After Brandon left for work and Tyler left for school, I drove to the bank, our bank, where I'd been a customer for 12 years, where the tellers knew me by name. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," said Janet, the head teller. "How can I help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about my accounts," I said. "All of them. What I learned in that meeting changed everything." The account I didn't recognize, the one with $50,000 of my money in it, was a joint account belonging to Brandon and my mother. They'd opened it 3 months ago. "This is definitely your signature on the authorization to move funds," the bank manager, Mr. Thompson, explained. "But if you don't remember signing this, I remember now." I lied smoothly. "I just wanted to check on the balance." Mr. Thompson looked relieved. Banks hate family disputes, especially when large amounts of money are involved. But I wasn't going to make this the bank's problem. I was going to handle this myself. My next stop was the library, but not to work. I needed to use the computers for research that couldn't be traced back to my home computer. I spent hours learning about divorce law in our state, about asset division and child custody, about what happens when one spouse can prove the other has been hiding money. But more importantly, I learned about a different kind of law, the kind that deals with fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Taking money from accounts without permission, even between spouses, was still theft if it could be proven that the money had been obtained through deception. And I could prove that. By the time I picked Tyler up from school, I had the beginnings of a plan. Not just to get my money back, but to make sure Brandon and my mother paid for what they'd done to me. But I had to be smart about it. They thought I was weak and emotional. That was going to be my greatest advantage. "How was school today?" I asked Tyler as we drove home. "Good. We're learning about the Revolutionary War in history class. Did you know that sometimes the colonists pretended to be loyal to the British while they were actually planning to fight them? Out of the mouths of babes. That's very interesting, sweetie. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to let your enemies think they've already won." That night, I cooked Brandon's favorite dinner, pot roast with potatoes and carrots. I wore their dress he'd complimented me on our anniversary. I smiled and laughed at his jokes and asked about his day with genuine seeming interest. "You seem happy tonight," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I am happy," he said. And it wasn't entirely a lie. For the first time in months, I had a purpose, a plan, a reason to get up in the morning. "I was thinking," I continued, "maybe we should have my mother over for dinner this weekend. It's been a while since we all spent time together." Something flickered in Brandon's eyes. "That sounds great, sweetheart. I'm sure Helen would love that." "Helen, not your mother or mom like he usually said. Helen, like they were close, like they knew each other well, which of course they did." "I'll call her tomorrow," I said. That night, as Brandon slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned. Phase 1 was information gathering, and that was almost complete. Phase 2 would be preparation, making sure I had everything I needed to destroy them both. But Phase 3, that would be the most important part. That would be making sure they both understood exactly what they'd lost when they decided to underestimate Rebecca Miller. In the darkness, I smiled for the first time in weeks. The call to my mother the next morning was a masterpiece of acting. "Mom," I said, letting my voice sound small and uncertain. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner Saturday night." "Oh, sweetie, that sounds lovely," she said, and I could practically hear the satisfaction in her voice. Poor, pathetic Rebecca, reaching out for the comfort of family she didn't deserve. "Is everything all right? You sound a little down." "I'm fine," I said, injecting just the right amount of fake cheerfulness into my voice. "Maybe a little tired. Brandon's been working so much lately, and I feel like I barely see him." "Men work hard to provide for their families, dear. You should be grateful, not complaining." The casual cruelty in her tone was so familiar I almost missed it. But this time, instead of making me feel small, it fueled the fire burning in my chest. You're right, of course, I just miss him, you know. Well, a good wife finds ways to keep herself busy instead of bothering her husband with neediness. You're absolutely right. I'll see you Saturday around 6. Perfect. Should he bring anything? Just yourself, Mom. That's all we need. After I hung up, E sat in my kitchen and marveled at how easy it was to play the role they expected. The weak, grateful daughter, the needy, pathetic wife. I'd been playing that role so long I'd forgotten it was a performance, but now that I was acting consciously, I could see exactly how they'd manipulated me. Every criticism disguised as helpful advice. Every backhanded compliment designed to keep me grateful for attention I didn't deserve. Every time they'd made me feel like I was lucky to be tolerated. The rage that filled me then was clean and cold and purposeful. My next stop was an office supply store where I bought a small digital recorder, the kind college students use to record lectures. Then I went to an electronics store and bought a tiny wireless camera supposedly for home security. If Brandon and my mother wanted to have secret conversations, I was going to make sure I had evidence of every word. That afternoon, I did something else I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not practical clothes that would help me fade into the background. Not modest conservative outfits chosen to avoid attention. I bought a black dress that actually fit my figure instead of hiding it. I bought makeup that would bring out my eyes. I even bought a pair of heels that made me feel taller and more confident. The woman in the dressing room mirror looked like a stranger, like someone who might actually deserve good things in life. When I got home, I hid my purchases in the back of my closet and went back to being the old Rebecca, at least on the surface. Saturday came quickly. I spent the day cleaning the house and preparing dinner just like I had hundreds of times before. But this time, I also spent time setting up my equipment. The wireless camera went in the living room, disguised as a decorative piece on the mantel. The digital recorder went in my pocket already turned on. Brandon arrived home from work at 5:30, giving us just enough time to get ready before my mother arrived. "You look nice," he said when he saw me in the kitchen checking on the roast. I was wearing one of my old outfits, simple slacks and a plain sweater. Nothing that would indicate any change in my personality or circumstances. "Thank you," I said, smiling at him the way I always did. Like, his approval was the most important thing in the world. My mother arrived exactly at 6, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the kind of outfit that cost more than I usually spent on clothes in a year. She hugged me and kissed my cheek, the picture of a loving mother. "Rebecca, darling, you look tired. Are you getting enough sleep?" The first shot delivered with surgical precision. A criticism disguised as concern designed to make me feel self-conscious and inadequate. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with Tyler and work and everything." "Well, you know what they say, a woman's work is never done." She lobbed and handed Brandon the wine. "Hello, Brandon. You look wonderful as always." The way she looked at my husband made my skin crawl. There was something possessive in her gaze, something that suggested ownership. But I smiled and thanked her for the wine and served dinner like nothing was wrong. The conversation during dinner was torture. My mother and Brandon kept exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. They had inside jokes I wasn't part of. They talked about people and events in ways that made it clear they discussed these things privately. "Oh, Brandon," my mother said at one point, "did you ever get that permit issue sorted out with the city?" My blood went cold. Brandon hadn't mentioned any permit issues to me, but he answered easily like this was a topic they'd discussed before. "Yeah, finally got it handled. Thanks for asking." "What permit issue?" I asked innocently. "Just work stuff, babe. Nothing to worry about." But my mother was nodding like she knew exactly what permit issue he was talking about. After dinner, I excused myself to get dessert from the kitchen. While I was gone, I could hear them talking in low voices in the dining room. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was intimate, familiar. When I returned with the pie, they were sitting just a little too far apart, like they'd been closer before I walked in. "This looks delicious, sweetheart," Brandon said, but his smile seemed forced. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and fake smiles. My mother left around 9 with another hug and kiss that felt like acid on my skin. "Thank you for a lovely evening, dear. We should do this more often." "Definitely," I agreed. Family is so important. After she left, Brandon helped me clean up the dishes. "Your mother seemed to enjoy herself," he said. "She did. I'm glad you two get along so well. She's a good woman. She raised you right." The lies came so easily to him. The casual deception was breathtaking in its completeness. That night, I lay in bed listening to Brandon sleep and planned the next phase of my revenge. I had evidence now, recorded conversations that would make it clear they were having secret discussions about things they kept from me. Video footage of their body language and interactions. But I needed more. I needed proof of the financial theft. I needed documentation of their affair because I was now certain that's what this was. Most importantly, I needed them to incriminate themselves completely. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The following Wednesday, Brandon announced he'd be working late again. "Big deadline on the Jackson job," he said, kissing my forehead at breakfast. "Might not be home until after midnight." But when I drove past the Jackson house at lunchtime, there were no work trucks there, no sign of construction activity. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I did something that would have seemed impossible just a month ago. I got in my car and drove to the construction site where Brandon kept his equipment. His truck was not there and the lights were off and there was no sign of activity. From there, I drove to my mother's house. Brandon's truck was in her driveway. This time, I was prepared. I parked 2 blocks away and walked back, staying in the shadows. I had my digital recorder in one pocket and my phone in the other, ready to take pictures if needed. The conversation I overheard that night was the final nail in their coffin. "When are you going to tell her?" My mother's voice was sharp with impatience. "After Christmas? I promised Tyler I'd make it a good Christmas. For him. You're too soft. She doesn't deserve consideration. Look, Helen, I know you're eager to get this over with, but I have to think about my son. Your son will be better off without that pathetic woman dragging him down. You both will." There was a long pause, then Brandon's voice again, quieter. "Sometimes I think about what our life could have been like if I'd chosen you from the beginning instead of settling for her." My mother's laugh was low and pleased. "Better late than never, darling. Once you're free of her, we can finally be together the way we should have been all along. The way we should have been." The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just About money or convenience? They'd been in love all along. My husband and my mother. Have you figured out how to get the rest of the money? My mother asked. Most of it's already moved to our account. She's so trusting she signs whatever I put in front of her. The house will take more work, but I've been forging her signature on refinancing documents. By the time I file for divorce, there won't be anything left for her to fight over. What about Tyler? I'll get custody. Who's going to give a child to a woman with a history of depression and mental instability? Does she have a history of that? Brandon's laugh was cold. She will by the time my lawyer is done building the case. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The way Brandon had been encouraging me to see a therapist for my anxiety. The way he'd been documenting my emotional outbursts. Moments when I'd cried or gotten frustrated that any normal person would have. He'd been building a case against me for months, maybe years, creating a paper trail that would paint me as an unfit mother. I recorded 20 more minutes of their conversation, documenting their plans to destroy my reputation, steal my assets, and take my child. By the time I crept away from that house, I had enough evidence to bury them both. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a divorce lawyer in the next town over. Someone Brandon wouldn't know who wouldn't have any connection to our local community. I need to document spousal financial fraud and plan a divorce strategy, I told her, and I need absolute confidentiality until I'm ready to proceed. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Daisy Walsh, agreed to meet with me that afternoon. The second call was to a private investigator Maeve recommended, someone who specialized in adultery cases and financial crimes. The third call was to my bank, but not to Mr. Thompson, to his supervisor, a woman named Carol Stevens who handled fraud cases. I believe my husband has been forging my signature on financial documents. I told her, I need to document this, but I don't want him to know I'm investigating yet. Carol was professional and sympathetic. We can definitely help you with that, Mrs. Miller. How soon can you come in? By Thursday afternoon, I had a paper trail documenting every illegal thing Brandon had done with our money. I had photographs of him at my mother's house when he was supposed to be working. I had recorded conversations proving their affair and their plans to destroy me. I also had a court-ordered freeze on all our accounts scheduled to go into effect the moment I filed for divorce, but it still wasn't ready to play my hand. I wanted them to dig their hole even deeper. Friday evening, I cooked Brandon's favorite, dinner again. This time, I was wearing the new black dress I bought along with the makeup that brought out my eyes. He noticed immediately. Wow, you look amazing tonight. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to look nice for my husband? I asked, smiling at him in a way that would have been genuine a month ago. During dinner, I brought up something that made his face go pale. I was thinking, I said casually, maybe we should plan a vacation for Christmas. Somewhere warm. Tyler's never seen the ocean. That sounds expensive, Brandon said carefully. Oh, I don't think money will be a problem. I talked to my dad's insurance company today and they said there might be additional benefits I didn't know about. Something about compound interest on delayed payouts. The lie rolled off my tongue so smoothly it surprised me, but the effect on Brandon was immediate and satisfying. He nearly choked on his wine. Really? How much are we talking about? They're not sure yet. Could be another 50,000, maybe more. They're going to call me next week with the final numbers. Brandon's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, greed, calculation, and finally something that looked like panic. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Really wonderful. But I could see the wheels turning in his head. If there was more insurance money coming, he'd want to get his hands on it before he left me, which meant he'd have to delay his timeline, which meant I had more time to prepare my final blow. That night after Brandon fell asleep, I heard him get up around 2 a.m. I listened through the crack in our bedroom door. Ash made a phone call from the kitchen. Helen? Yeah, it's me. We have a problem. I crept to the top of the stairs, recording device in hand. She says there's more insurance money coming, another 50 grand. No, I don't think she suspects anything. She's too stupid to put it together. We might have to wait longer than planned. I know. But if we move too fast and miss out on that money. His voice faded as he walked further into the kitchen. But I'd heard enough. They were going to delay destroying me until they could steal even more money that didn't exist. Perfect. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. Not because of what Brandon and my mother were doing to me. I was past caring about their betrayal. The hard part was pretending to be the same weak, grateful woman they expected while I prepared to destroy them both. Every morning I woke up and put on the mask of old Rebecca. Humble, anxious, grateful for any scrap of attention or affection. I cooked Brandon's favorite meals, asked about his day with genuine seeming interest, and made sure Tyler never suspected anything was wrong. But underneath, I was a woman transformed. I spent my lunch hours meeting with lawyers and investigators. I documented every lie, every theft, every moment of betrayal. I built a case so airtight that no judge in the world would let Brandon walk away with my money or my sin. The private investigator, a former police detective named Mike Torres, was particularly helpful. In 30 years of doing this job, he told me during one of our meetings, I've never seen documentation this thorough. Your husband isn't just cheating and stealing, he's created a paper trail that proves criminal intent. What kind of charges are we talking about? I asked. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery. If the prosecutor wants to push it, he could be looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. The thought should have made me feel guilty. This was the father of my child, the man I'd loved for 12 years, but all I felt was cold satisfaction. Meanwhile, Brandon was getting more nervous by the day. The imaginary insurance money I'd mentioned was supposedly being processed by the company, and he kept asking when I'd hear back from them. These things take time, I tell him, but they assured me it would be worth the wait. My mother was getting impatient too. She started calling more frequently, always asking about the insurance money in that casual way that wasn't casual at all. Any word from the insurance company, dear? Not yet, Mom, but hopefully soon. I acted surprised since I didn't tell her, but she still told me words flies. Well, you know what they say? Good things come to those who wait. If only she knew how true that was going to be. The break I'd been waiting for came on a Thursday evening in early December. Brandon announced he'd be working late again, but this time he made a mistake. The Jackson job is behind schedule, he said. Might have to work all weekend to catch up. But I'd driven past the Jackson house that afternoon. It was completely finished. The family was already moving in. That night, I followed him again. But instead of going to my mother's house, he drove to a motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. My mother's car was already in the parking lot. I parked across the street and waited. Through the window of room 237, I could see two figures moving around. I couldn't make out details, but I didn't need to. The private investigator had given me a camera with a telephoto lens, and I used it to document everything. Brandon's truck in the motel parking lot, my mother's car next to it. The timestamp showing it was 0:47 p.m. on a Thursday when he was supposed to be working. But the real evidence came when they finally left the room. They were so comfortable with each other, so casual. Brandon had his arm around my mother's waist. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking up at him with obvious affection. They looked like a couple, a real couple who'd been together for a long time. I took pictures of everything, then drove home and uploaded them to the encrypted folder the private investigator had set up for me. When Brandon came home at midnight, I was waiting up with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. Long day, I asked sympathetically. Exhausting, but we're making progress. That's good. I worry about you working so hard. He kissed the top of my head, and I had to fight not to recoil from his touch. You're too good to me, Rebecca. If he only knew. The next morning, I made the call I'd been preparing for weeks. Daisy, it's Rebecca Miller. I'm ready to file. Are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no going back. I'm sure. I want to file today, and I want the account freeze to go into effect immediately. Consider it done. Can you be at my office? At 2 p.m.? I'll be there. Before I left for the lawyer's office, I did one last thing. I called the construction company Brandon claimed to be working for and asked to speak with the foreman of the Jackson job. Jackson job? The man sounded confused. That job was finished 2 weeks ago. Has been since mid-November. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood. My husband, Brandon Miller, said he was working there this week. Brandon Miller, we don't have any jobs running this week. Slow season, you know? The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Brandon didn't just work for a construction company. He owned a small one. But business had been slow, and instead of telling me the truth, he'd been pretending to have steady work while he stole my money and planned his escape. At 2 p.m., I sat in Daisy Walsh's office and signed papers that would destroy my husband's life. The account freeze goes into effect at close of business today, she explained. He won't be able to access any of the joint accounts or the money he moved to his account with your mother. What about the house? Since you can prove he forged your signature on the refinancing documents, those transactions are void. The house stays in your name and custody of Tyler? Daisy smiled grimly. Given the evidence of financial fraud and the psychological manipulation you've documented, I'd say there's virtually no chance he'll get custody. Supervised visitation at best. What happens next? He'll be served with papers tomorrow morning. I'd recommend you not be home when that happens. Take Tyler and go somewhere safe until we see how he reacts. What about criminal charges? That's up to you. The evidence is strong enough that the district attorney would definitely prosecute if he wanted to press charges. I thought about Brandon's plan to paint me as mentally unstable to steal my child. About my mother's casual cruelty and her joy in my pain. About the years of manipulation and lies. Press charges, I said. All of them. That evening, I made one final performance as the old Rebecca. I cooked dinner, helped Tyler with homework, and acted like everything was normal. Brandon was distracted, probably worried about the insurance money. That was never coming. After Tyler went to bed, I sat with Brandon on the couch to watch TV, just like we had thousands of times before. I love our life, I said, curling up against his side. Me too, babe. Me too. The lie came so easily to him. Even now, with papers being prepared to destroy him, he could look me in the eye and lie. But tomorrow, he'd learn what happened to people who underestimated Rebecca Miller. I woke up before dawn on Friday morning with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since as a child. Today was the day everything changed. I made breakfast for Tyler and got him ready for school as usual. Brandon had already left for his fake job, which meant he'd probably gone to my mother's house to continue planning my destruction. At 8:30, I drove Tyler to school and gave him an extra long hug. I love you so much, sweetheart, I told him. I love you too, Mom. Are you okay? You seem different lately. Smart boy. Too smart for his own good sometimes. I'm fine, baby. Better than fine. Everything's going to be okay. After dropping Tyler off, I drove to a coffee shop across town and settled in to wait. Daisy had texted me that the process server would deliver the papers between 9 and 10 a.m. At 9:47, my phone rang. Mrs. Miller, this is Officer Johnson with the Riverside Police Department. Your husband asked us to call you. My heart started racing, but I kept my voice calm. Is everything all right, officer? Well, ma'am, your husband was served with some legal papers this morning, and he's pretty upset. He's making some serious accusations about you, and we wanted to get your side of the story. What kind of accusations? He says, you've been acting erratically lately, that you've been lying about insurance money and trying to manipulate him. He's concerned about your mental state. I almost laughed. Even now, even when his world was crashing down around him, Brandon was trying to play the concerned husband card. Officer Johnson, I think you should know that those papers are divorce documents filed because I discovered my husband has been stealing from our joint accounts and having an affair with my mother. There was a long pause. Your mother? Yes. I have extensive documentation of both the financial fraud and the affair. I'd be happy to share it with you if needed. Ma'am, would you be willing to come down to the station to give a statement? Of course. I'll be right there. The police station was a 10-minute drive from the coffee shop. When I walked in, I could hear Brandon's voice echoing from somewhere in the back of the building. She's been acting crazy for weeks. This is all in her head. She's making things up. Officer Johnson met me at the front desk. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Mrs. Miller, I'm Bob Johnson. Thank you for coming in. He led me to a small interview room where I spent the next hour laying out my entire case, the financial records showing Brandon's theft, the photos of him at the motel with my mother, the recordings of their conversations planning my destruction. Officer Johnson's expression grew more serious with each piece of evidence it presented. Mrs. Miller, this is extensive. You've been documenting this for weeks. I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed to protect my son and myself. What you've shown me here, this constitutes criminal fraud, possibly embezzlement. Are you prepared to file charges? Yes, I am. What about your mother? She's clearly involved in this too. I want charges filed against there as well. Officer Johnson nodded. We'll need to interview both of them separately. Your husband is still here, but we'll need to bring your mother in. She's probably at her house or at the motel where they've been meeting. We'll find her. In the meantime, is there somewhere safe you can stay? Mr. Miller is. Well, he's not taking this well. I thought about Tyler, who would be getting out of school in a few hours. About the house that was legally mine, but might not feel safe anymore. I'll figure something out. Officer Johnson handed me his card. Call me if you need anything. And Mrs. Miller, what you did here documenting everything so thoroughly. That took real courage. Courage? It was the first time in my adult life anyone had called me courageous. I left the police station and drove to Tyler's school. It was only noon, but I needed to see him to hold him and remind myself why I was doing all of this. I found him at lunch and asked his teacher if I could speak with him privately. Tyler, sweetheart, I need to tell you something important. His face immediately got serious. Is Dad okay? Dad is. Dad is going through some difficult things right now, and we're probably going to need to stay somewhere else for a few days while the grown-ups sort things out. Are you and Dad getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been so focused on my revenge that I'd almost forgotten. This would hurt Tyler too. Yes, baby, we are. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, picking at his sandwich. Is it because of Grandma Helen? I nearly fell off the cafeteria bench. What do you mean? I heard them talking on the phone sometimes. When Dad thought I was asleep, they sounded like they really liked each other more than family is supposed to. My 11-year-old son had figured out what I'd been too blind to see for months. Tyler, I need you to know that none of this is your fault, okay? Sometimes adults make bad choices, but that doesn't mean they don't love their children. Do you still love Dad? It was the hardest question anyone had ever asked me. A month ago, the answer would have been an automatic yes. No. I love the man I thought your father was, I said carefully. But it turns out he wasn't who I thought he was. Are we going to be okay? I pulled my son into my arms and held him tight. We're going to be better than okay, baby. I promise you that. That afternoon, I checked us into a hotel across town. Nothing fancy, just a clean, safe place where Tyler and I could figure out our next steps. My phone had been buzzing with calls and texts all day. Some from Brandon, ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. Some from my mother, mostly variations on, how could you do this to your own family? But the call that mattered came at 6 p.m., while Tyler and I were eating pizza and watching cartoons. Mrs. Miller, this is Officer Johnson. We've arrested both your husband and your mother. They're being charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. What happens now? They'll probably be released on bail tomorrow, but they'll have restraining orders against them. They won't be allowed to contact you or Tyler directly. What about the money they stole? The district attorney is confident we can recover most of it. The account they moved it to has been frozen, and we're working on tracing the cash withdrawals. After I hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, I'd been married to a man I thought I loved. Living in a house I thought was safe, part of a family I thought was real. Tonight, I was divorced. My husband and mother were in jail, and my whole life had been revealed as an elaborate lie. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Tyler looked up from his cartoon. Mom, are you crying? I touched my face and realized I was crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. I'm okay, baby. These are happy tears. Happy tears. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy, when they finally get free from something that was hurting them. Tyler considered this seriously. Are we free now? I looked at my son, my brave, smart, wonderful son, who deserved so much better than the broken family I'd been trying to hold together. Yes, Tyler, we're free. The trial took place 6 months later in the spring. By then, Tyler and I had settled into our new life in a small apartment across town. It wasn't as big as our old house, but it was ours in a way that house had never been. I'd gone back to work at Theliberry full-time, and Mrs. Maverick had been incredibly supportive through everything. The whole town had heard about the scandal. Of course, in a place like Riverside, news like that spreads faster than wildfire. But instead of the judgment and pity I'd expected, most people were surprisingly supportive. Other women came forward with their own stories of Brandon's inappropriate behavior over the years. Men from the construction industry revealed that Brandon's business had been failing for months before he started stealing from me. Even more surprising, several people mentioned that they'd never liked my mother, that they'd always thought there was something cold about her. She always acted like she was better than everyone else. Mrs. Maverick told me one afternoon like she was doing the world a favor by existing. The trial itself was almost anticlimactic. The evidence was so overwhelming that both Brandon and my mother ended up taking plea deals rather than face a jury. Brandon got 3 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. My mother got 18 months for conspiracy and her role in the scheme. I was in the courtroom when they were sentenced. Brandon looked at me with a mixture of anger and what might have been regret. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger she'd never seen before. Neither of them had ever apologized. The financial recovery took longer, but Daisy Walsh proved to be worth every penny I paid her. We recovered almost all of the stolen money, plus damages. The house sold quickly, and with the insurance money Brandon hadn't been able to steal, Tyler and I found ourselves more financially secure than we'd ever been. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was what I'd become in the process of fighting for it. The day after the sentencing, I did something I'd never done before. I went to a hair salon and asked for a complete makeover. I want to look like someone who can't be messed with. I told the stylist, a young woman named Crystal with purple streaks in her hair and kind eyes. When she was finished, the woman looking back at me from the mirror was confident, strong, and beautiful. Not because she was trying to please anyone else, but because she finally knew her own worth. That evening, Tyler and I went out to dinner to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just the diner downtown. But it felt like the most important meal of my life. You look different, Mom, Tyler said over his cheeseburger. Different how? Happier, like you're not afraid of anything anymore. I'm not afraid, I realized as I said it. For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. Are you glad we don't live with Dad anymore? It was a hard question, but I answered honestly. I'm sad that your dad made the choices he made, but I'm glad we got away from him before those choices hurt us even more. Are you going to get married again someday? I laughed. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. But if I do, it'll be to someone who thinks I'm amazing just the way I am. You're amazing, Mom. You're the strongest person I know, coming from my 11-year-old son. Those words meant more than any compliment I'd ever received. 7 months after the trial, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was the women's correctional facility where my mother was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Rebecca, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I realize now that I was wrong. Not just about the money, but about everything. I was wrong about you. You were never weak or pathetic or any of the other things I said. You were just trusting, and I took advantage of that trust. I was wrong about Brandon, too. He was never good enough for you, and I should have seen that from the beginning instead of encouraging him to hurt you. But mostly I was wrong about myself. I thought I deserved better than the life I had, and I convinced myself that taking what you had would make me happy. It didn't. It just made me a person I don't recognize. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you were right to fight back. You were right to protect yourself and Tyler. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Stronger than I ever was. I'm sorry, Rebecca, for everything. Helen? I read the letter, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Not because I was ready to forgive her. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for that, but because it was proof that sometimes even the worst people can recognize the truth when they're forced to face it. A year after the trial, Tyler and I moved into a new house. Nothing too big or fancy, just a comfortable place with a garden where I could grow the vegetables I'd always wanted to try. I'd been promoted to head librarian after Mrs. Maverick retired, and I loved the work more than ever. I'd also started teaching literacy classes for adults in the evening, helping people learn to read who'd never had the chance. One of my students was a woman named Maria, who'd left an abusive marriage with 2 young children. She reminded me of myself before I'd learned to fight back. I don't know how to be strong, she told me one evening after class. You already are strong, I told her. You left. That was the hardest part. Everything else is just learning new skills. Did you always know how to stand up for yourself? I laughed. Maria, 1 year ago, I would have apologized for breathing too loudly. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build one decision at a time. What was your first decision? I thought about that day at my mother's window, listening to Brandon and my mother plan my destruction. The moment when something inside me had finally said, enough, I decided I was worth fighting for, I said. Everything else came from that. 5 years have passed since that November day when my world shattered. Tyler is 16 now, tall and confident, and nothing like the broken woman I used to be. He's never asked to visit his father in prison, and I've never pushed the issue. Brandon was released after serving 2 and 1 to 2 years of his sentence. He moved to another state and has never tried to contact us. I heard through mutual friends that he's working construction again, living in an Asmal apartment, trying to rebuild his life. My mother was released after 14 months. She moved to Florida to live with her sister, and we haven't spoken since she left. I'm not sure we ever will again, and I've made my peace with that. People sometimes ask me if I regret what I did. If I think the revenge was worth destroying my marriage and sending my mother to prison, the answer is always the same. I didn't destroy my marriage. Brandon did that the moment he decided to steal from me and betray me with my own mother. I didn't send my mother to prison. She did that by choosing to participate in a criminal conspiracy against her own daughter. All I did was refuse to be a victim. The woman I am now would be unrecognizable to the woman I was 5 years ago. I run the library with confidence and authority. I own my own home. I've traveled to places I never thought I'd see. Paris, London, Rome. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Tyler, always with the knowledge that I can take care of myself wherever I go. I've dated a little, but I'm in no hurry to remarry. I like my independence too much, and I've learned to be very careful about who I let into my life. Any man who wants to be with me has to earn that privilege. Most importantly, I've raised a son who respects women and understands that real strength comes from protecting people who can't protect themselves, not from taking advantage of them. Tyler will leave for college next year, and for the first time in my life, I'm excited about being alone. Not because I don't love my son, but because I finally know who I am when no one else is around. I'm a woman who fought back when the world tried to break her. I'm a woman who discovered that she was never as weak as everyone told her she was. I'm a woman who learned that the best revenge is not just surviving, but thriving. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that moment behind my mother's kitchen window. The moment when I heard the 2 people I loved most planning my destruction. It was the worst moment of my life. It was also the moment I started becoming the woman I was always meant to be. They thought they were destroying me. Instead, they set me free. And that's a gift I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful of, pure.